I don't know how the mayor does it, but his glasses don't even fog up with his mask on. I'm gonna have to learn from him. Today, we have a topic about public transportation, which is important to each one of us. And we've got two individuals here, one from the city of Kingsport and one from the Tennessee Department of Transportation that's going to speak to us. First is no stranger to the club, is Michael Thompson. Mike's the Assistant Public Works Director for the city of Kingsport and has been for the past 11 years. Prior to that role, he worked for the city as a traffic engineer. And prior to that, worked for the city, he worked for transport engineer for the Roanoke and the Kingsport offices of Mattern and Craig, Gal Clifton's organization right there. Not his organization, y'all know what I mean. He's been serving the community through the Rotary Club, Kingsport, in the downtown club since 2002. Michael lives in Rock Springs, area of Kingsport, with his wife and teenage son. His hobbies are traveling, camping, and woodworking. And joining with him is Troy Ebbert. Did I say that right? Ebbert. Troy began working for TDOT in 2017 after working for the Kingsport Metropolitan Transportation Planning Organization for 4 years. Prior to transportation planning, he served 7 years for state and local planning assistance office at First Tennessee Development District in Washington County, Tennessee, as a principal land planner in Washington County. Troy's a graduate of East Tennessee State University. He works closely with developing new planners to do their internship programs, and he also serves as director of the State of Franklin section of the Tennessee American Planning Association. Troy lives in Kingsport, enjoys camping and boating with his wife Tabitha and 3 children, and he enjoys coaching his kids' sports team. So, welcome our two speakers today, and I think Troy's going to start out.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here today with y'all. I know a lot of you, we work together on different projects where I've been formerly worked for him once upon a time, a few years ago. Different things, worked with John on some projects, but Ronnie, some of these guys have decided I'll retire and go home. But Mike and I were talking about this, we decided to talk about bridging the gap. One thing that those of you who have worked with us before know anything about dealing with projects and transportation, we get a lot of, you know a little bit about that. Why does it take so long? So we're going to talk about a few of those things and kind of go through it. So this is a picture of the Hammond Bridge before 1965 when the other bridge was built. So, good. All right, so I wanted to look at what the mission statement was of both organizations. Kingsport's Transportation Division provides safe, reliable transportation system that supports the economic prosperity. TDOT's provide a safe, efficient, and sustainable transportation network that provides economic development opportunities. We hear a lot, and depends on who you're talking to, about why we do these roads, and part of it is making sure that we can get around. Now, reliability doesn't mean that you're going to be able to go from point A to point B as fast as you want any time. That means you go from point A to point B in the same amount of time every time. For example, y'all been through I-75 in Knoxville. You know, during certain times of day, it's going to take you about 20 extra minutes to get through that area, but it's consistently 20 extra minutes. When you go to downtown Nashville, you don't know how long it's going to take you to get out there. It might take 20 minutes, it might take 4 hours. The reliability is what we're looking for. That's one of the biggest things. Now, Knoxville has the highest traffic counts in the state of Tennessee, but at the same time, they also have the highest reliability rates. And a lot of that has to do with the leadership that TDOT's gone through and taking care of the interchanges. So, go ahead. So this is a fourfold, they always talk about the 3-legged stool and stuff like that. We have 4. It all starts with Federal Highway. Every time you pump a gallon of gas, if you look, there's a little sticker up there and it says, so much for federal gas tax, so much for state gas taxes. Our state gas tax did go up 6 cents over the last 4 years, I believe. And what we're doing with those funds is we're getting a lot of the projects that we have, we're leveraging that money against the federal dollars. Because just like when Kingsport does a project, or the MPO, or any of the other cities, there's typically a match requirement if you're using it, and it's usually a 20% match. We have the same thing. Now, one thing TDOT does, and does well, is we are a pay-as-you-go state. We don't borrow money to build roads. It might take a little bit longer, but we're not paying any debt service whatsoever on any of our streets for TDOT for any of our projects. So TDOT's involved, the Kingsport MPO, which Mike oversees and works with closely with Bill Albright. We have former chairman up here of some of those projects. They oversee not just the city of Kingsport, but the region. It's about a 300 square mile region that goes up into Virginia. TDOT can't spend any money in this area without the MPO's approval. We want to pave, let's say, State Route 93 from one end to the other this year. Well, we have to put money and get approval for that MPO board so we can spend the money inside of that area, okay? Same thing with Johnson City, same thing with Bristol. And I'm also over the Morristown and the Knoxville version, so I have 5 in my area. It's the only one in the state that has 5 MPOs. Everyone else has 2, so they're slacking there. And then the cities, for instance, like Kingsport, Mount Carmel, Churchill, those are your main cities within the Kingsport MPO. They all come together and they will work, they represent on the MPO board, but if the city of Kingsport wants to go through, let's say, do a paving project, where we want to do a project like Main Street, and Mike's going to talk about some of these here in a little bit, they can leverage that federal dollars through the MPO that has been pushed down through the state to do those projects, and we want you all to do that, because if we don't spend our money, we can't get any more. If TDOT and the MPOs, we spend all that money down, in Texas or Arkansas or Kentucky doesn't get around to spending their money because they don't have the match funds to it, we can go after their money in August. And we typically will pull in $150-ish million a year for extra projects, because we have things, we still have match money left. They're paying debt service. So, good. All right, with money, go ahead, comes the red tape. If you're touching federal dollars, you are gonna have red tape galore, just like this is shown. Go ahead. So, there's a few ways we have to do things. I'm in the long-range planning division of TDOT. So we're kind of at the beginning and the end all at the same time. It's a big, nasty circle we'll get into. We have to go through what's called a long-range planning cycle. So the Kingsport MPO is working on that one over there, the second from the end right now. That's their long-range transportation plan. If we have a project that we want done as TDOT for the city of Kingsport or Mount Carmel or Churchill, it has to be in that plan or it doesn't happen, okay? Now, that plan can be amended, it can be added into, but if it's not in there, it will not, we can't continue, and that's because the federal guidelines say so. It goes from that plan and this plan, which is called the Transportation Improvement Plan. That's the 3-year plan. That's where we start putting money with it. The first one talks about money, kinda, but really the need. The second one is, all right, this is the project we're gonna move forward with. It's gonna cost an X amount of dollars, and then we start to phase projects and move them through. Now, TDOT also has one. Okay, on that side, thanks. We do a 3-year plan every year. So the MPOs, if you've ever dealt with any of the MPOs or even the RPOs, they go through and they rank the projects, okay? Project rankings, that is 11% of the project ranking when it goes to Nashville. Region 1 down in Knoxville, they have another 11%, so about 22 to 23% of the entire reason of why we want to do these projects comes from this area. The other parts are going to be safety. Safety's a big one. We push those through, and then we will assign funding to come along with it. This program, now that's construction dollars. The MPO also receives, and we do as well, it's just called something different. They receive PL funds or planning dollars. So that's what pays the MPOs to do their job. That pays for their cars, that pays for their electricity. If the city wanted to charge them, I don't think they do, they house them for free, which is really nice. But they don't have to do that. They could charge them for that. But in return, there's a lot of give and take, so they work really close to each other. It's a great relationship. Outlined in this document, that's their work program. Every 2 years, they have to come through, they say, we're gonna do this study, this study, this study, and we're gonna buy a new laptop. Okay, it all goes in there. That can also be amended, it has to be approved by the board. And then the PPP, that is the public participation plan. So as you all understand with federal, with state, local government, state government, we have the sunshine law. We don't wanna, make sure everyone's aware. Well, these agencies operate a little different under the federal law. They have the public participation plan. For a planning commission, you have to advertise 14 days prior to the meeting, has to be in the newspaper, all those rules in TCA. Well, that doesn't exist for MPOs. It's in this document. And all the federal government says is that you have it. It doesn't say the specifics about it. So the MPO, this MPO may have a 7-day public notice requirement where it's put out in the newspaper or it's sent out via electronic. Knoxville may have 10, Bristol may have 3, and we had one that was a reasonable time. So there's a lot of government. It's not as easy as dealing with 6 planning commissions at once. It's more, you have to know every one of these documents. So for my team in Region 1, we have 5 of them, and we have to do this 5 times. And Kingsport is lucky enough to be a bi-state MPO, so they get to do everything twice. Because they do it once for us and they do it once for Virginia. Go ahead. This is the circle that I was talking about. Just disclaimer, every presentation that is done by OCT, I believe we have to have this circle in here. Pretty sure it's a requirement. This started in 2012, we've had it ever since. So basically what my job is with community transportation, I am not the outreach. Mark Nagy is our media specialist. He's the person that does all the push out of information to the media. If I get a call from the Kingsport Press or anyone else, I'm calling him saying, hey, they want to talk to me, is that okay? What I do is I have outreach. We talk to mayors, we talk to MPOs, we talk to city managers, we talk to anybody who calls and says, hey, I got a problem. Where do I talk to at TDOT? Okay? I've had them, I was at a Kiwanis club down in Sevierville, and they said, hey, I've had a tree fall across the property line from TDOT. What do I do? Give me a minute, I'll get your phone number. So I call the district manager who is over maintenance, get them hooked up. Oh yeah, I went to school with him, tree was gone. It's that simple. But when you're on a battleship, you don't know what department to go to, it's hard to find out who you need to talk to. So I'm one of those folks that, I'm a finder. I have a lot of information and I know who to talk to, so I have to be plugged into almost every floor that we have in TDOT. So when I go down there, used to go down there, I would ride the elevator. And I learned that from Bill Albright. When I first started, it was ride the elevator. You go to the 6th floor, the 9th floor, you go to the 11th floor, 12th floor, you talk to, in the 18th floor, you talk to everybody on those divisions because you want to know what's going on with your project. So when they sign my name to it, they know, oh yeah, that's Troy from Kingsport. That's not some MPO coordinator we don't know about. And it works because you have green belts that are built. You have sidewalks coming in on some of these projects through grants. That's the kind of networking that we did. Of course, it didn't hurt that I got a job down there. So now I know all of them because of that. So one thing that we were originally designed to do, and that we had them morphed into this monster of a little bit of everything. Our original purpose was to tie land use decisions in with transportation. So when a planning commission comes through and they say, hey, we have a subdivision of property, we're gonna put in 90 houses on this road, I can look at that and we monitor everyone's planning commission agendas. We look at those and we give our traffic division a heads up. We let Andy Padgett and we let Ryan know that, hey, by the way, we have a new 90-unit subdivision coming in over here. Keep an eye out for it because you have to get a state permit to do that. We also want to know what kind of traffic we're looking at. So if you're putting it on a 10-foot wide road that we're going to generate, let's say, 700 vehicle trips a day, that's going to be a problem. We need to get ahead of that. Whether it's something that TDOT does or something that the local developer does. If it's on a state route, we will deal with it. If it's not on a state route, we let them know. We also look at big rezonings, something go from agriculture to a high level land use. We look for those things to try to get ahead of the curve to make sure that we have our stuff ready ahead of time. We have done other projects like on State Route 449, y'all been the old way to Dollywood, it's now a big wide road, the main way to Dollywood now. We have access management, between the two cities, we've set up with access management guidelines on that road. It was the city's idea, we were heavily supportive of it. So there are curb cuts down through there today. And every curb cut that will ever be has already been designated. If you go through and you subdivide that property, you will be have to get a different way to that road. We will stand behind them 100%. But what that does is that keeps that road flowing. That means we don't have curb cut with people pulling out in front of you all the time, and that's where you have your conflicts. That's when your speed starts slowing down, because speed limit has a lot to do with the number of curb cuts. That's one of the things we look at. The more curb cuts, the slower the speed has to be. And we want that thing to move traffic. So we're looking at that, and we're actually looking at that on all new facilities now. That's one thing I've been pushing heavily for. Anything that we build brand new, State Route 66 in Hamlin County, you get off at exit 4, you can go all the way in on a 4-lane divided highway down. I have pushed heavy, and we have a corridor management agreement on that. We know what's gonna be developed and where these things are gonna be, so we can protect these multi-million-dollar facilities. So anyway, as the project goes, we make improvements to the arterial road. Arterial road, those are gonna be your main routes, okay? Make improvements to it, that means you have increased accessibility. So, land use goes up. Land use goes up, that means the land value goes up. That's the economic change that we were talking about. We wanna help support that in communities as much as possible. Well, the land use changes. It's not a farm anymore. Now you have the Dollar Tree, the Dollar General's gonna pop in on a corner, because they're gonna come in on every corner. They start working their way up, then you're gonna have gas stations, then you're gonna have some subdivisions. Well, you know, where we open up more land, and this is all the transportation planning. The land gets developed, traffic starts increasing, people start screaming because they can't get through, so let's throw up a signal, let's do something different with this interchange. Deterioration and level of service. Level of service is kind of an older term that we use, but it's cleaner for general public. Basically, you have A through F. If it's really good or it's empty and it's not functioning, it's functioning well, but you don't have a lot of cars on it. That's an A. When you get to an F, it's like sitting down in Nashville's traffic. You're not going anywhere, okay? Somewhere in the middle is kind of where we want to be. We want our roads to be utilized. And when we hit something like a level C-ish, that's where we want to start looking at expanding or doing something different, whether it's more multimodal options, depends on the road, whether it's adding capacity, adding lanes, because adding lanes isn't always the answer. Maybe adding lanes or maybe improving the intersections. That's what we start looking at. So the public starts complaining, we start looking at it, then we go back and start doing our arterial improvements again. And it's just a big washing machine. We're gonna keep rolling through on all these. But so, it sounds simple, why does it take so long? Well, it's like this. TDOT, they're gonna come up with the project. That's what my job is. I have to come up with, you know what, we need a road over here. This is a really good idea. And then I have to give it to someone like Mike, who has to figure out how to put it there. So my job's fun. We can give them a lot of gray hairs, because it's like, yeah, that's okay. You can put it right through there. It doesn't matter. And then you have environmental and a lot of other things that they have to deal with. That's why with my profession, I have been much more plugged into what engineers do and what they're getting into. So when I do come through and we start looking at things, it's, well, that's not gonna work, and here's why, because he's already taught me that we can't do this here. It is impossible. Or we know that there's acid producing rock here. We're not gonna touch that if we can help it. I mean, we can fix it. It just depends on how much money we wanna throw at it. So the project's identified through long-range planning. Design team, they start working on the designs. A technical proposal submitted. We have a division that does the pre-design. They look at it, a technical study's done. They look at it and they say, well, this project's gonna cost about this much money today. Now, when you get around to building it 15 years from now, we have to put that inflation root on. Pricing proposal, that comes in here, design. Now, once we get past 4, I'm basically done, okay? They get the money in there. We will work with the MPO. If it's a TDOT project, push through, make sure the money gets put in the tip, make sure it's programmed in the 3-year. They've already voted on it because they want the project to come through. And then it is design build contract. This is for design build, which is like what we'd really like to see because it goes faster. Then you come to the final design, project clearance, and then you start construction. Well, it's only 7 little steps. Go ahead. So it's not that big of a deal, right? all our funding is phased. So we have planning, which is done prior to, but then you start with your environmental stuff. You start with your original survey. You're looking at where this road's gonna go. So we get our survey teams and our engineering teams to start looking at these roads and looking at these projects. From that point, we go into round one phasing, which is our PE NEPA, which is environmental and PE design. So we have three main phases that we typically work with. We'll throw money in that initial group. Well, a design may take 3 to 5 years depending on the size of the project and the environmental issues. It could be something as easy as a sidewalk. That's gonna be an exclusion. And that'll still take a couple weeks if you're lucky on the environmental side. But if you start getting outside of that existing right of way, it gets difficult, and that's something else we deal with. If we come up with an idea where to put the road and it's not a good idea and they have to move it, and we've already done that portion of the study, we gotta go back and start over, or they do. Because they have to move those lines and say, well, we need to expand our study area. That's why a lot of times you see this massive swath on the road. And that swath is the area we're looking at studying, but it's only gonna be a little tiny area. And that gets people real happy.
When their house is in that?
Yeah, when you have their house in there, they start getting excited. Preliminary design, environmental, and then right away and construction. That's what we work with. If we're already in our PE and we're designing it, we're already chasing the right of way money. We know it's gonna take, let's say, 2 years to get the design through, or 3 years. We're gonna start buying, we start asking for the right of way money. So it gets planned 3 years ahead of time. Hopefully by the time we get done with this, we move straight into right of way. Right away, depending on the size of the project, may take 2 years, might take 3 or 4 years. Memorial Boulevard, that is the largest project that the state of Tennessee's ever undertaken for buying right away. So that's about a 3-year process. And it's just like if you bought a house, you go in, you sit down in the living room, here's the money we have to offer you, here's what we're looking at, you can counter, you can argue with, and you can tell them no, it's there. But one thing TDOT does is if they end up taking your home, one thing they try to do is they try to make it where you don't have to lift a finger. If they have to buy your home, it's, okay, we'll find you something comparable, or you find what you want, we'll move all your stuff there, you don't have to do a thing. Now, if you decide to pack it yourself and take that money and put it as a down payment, you can do that too. We don't care. We're gonna give you a check and you push through, but you don't have to lift a finger to be moved into a new place. Then it goes into the 3-year funding plan. Go ahead. The 3-year funding is what we're getting into right now, by the way. We're getting into that season. This is the real way everything works, okay? So you have your nice little 7 steps, really simple. It starts getting real complicated real quick. Now this one is specific for local programs, someone who would be managed like what Mike deals with. Mike has this memorized, I think, at least that first part. See the stop signs. Well, see every one of these little green boxes like this one, that's where you get your notice to proceed. With funding, I can't go ahead and give money towards right away and start the surveyors and buying property until we know it's done, because the federal requirements say you cannot proceed until this one's done. So you're doing one thing at a time. There is not multitasking in this, except for the funding part. We try to get the money ready, so when this one's done, we just step right into the next project and start moving. But that's a lot of the challenge, is meeting that. It's a lot of juggling on those parts. So with this one, I think you're gonna take over and start talking about some project specifics.
So I do want to point out, this is real. I've had several people think this was a joke.
Yeah.
That we just made this up, and no, that is actually the process when we're doing a project using federal dollars that we have to use. And, like you mentioned, the right-of-way phase for Memorial Boulevard, that's one of those little boxes that's gonna take 3 years. But what I wanted to do is move into some specific examples here locally, and just give you some samples of, say, 3 different types of projects that we have going on, so that you can see how we partner to get these things done. The first one is a little bit odd. It's a Rock Springs Road. It's State Route 347. It was identified years ago as a need through multiple studies. And then, it just wasn't high enough on the priority list with TDOT. So did a lot of lobbying and talking to people in Nashville, and found out if we would put some local federal dollars in with that, which when we talk about local, dollars, the MPO, the Kingsport area MPO is all funded through the federal gas tax, is when I talk about that funding. And there's just a portion of that the state gives this area, to allocate in their plan. So that one has $1 million worth of that funding as well, and the rest of it's TDOT funding. And just the update on this one is we planned on having a preliminary field review this summer, and they hope to have a public hearing this coming winter, next winter, about a year from now. Then you have the big boy sitting out there in Kingsport, which is Memorial Boulevard. Phase 1 is the one they've been working on, and this is a project that goes way back and actually was one of the first, what they call context-sensitive solutions projects in the state, where they went way further than they ever had before to make sure that the people, the business, all the needs of the area, the cultural resources and everything were looked at in a much deeper fashion before they even did the environmental document. That project, like you said, is in the middle of right away. Next summer is when they think they'll be done with that. But he mentioned the 3-year plan. The construction phase of that project's not funded yet at the state level because it was a 3-year right-of-way process. So we have to do a little bit of trust in the process, and hopefully they'll be ready, and hopefully the next 3-year plan that TDOT produces shows that the construction money. You have a number you'll throw out there for the cost of that one?
That's a lot of zeros.
The whole project as a whole is over $100 million. I'll just say that. It's with the right of way and everything, just phase 1. Phase 2, they're doing they've done survey and started real design is where they're at on that one, I believe. And then Main Street rebuild is another one near and dear to our heart down here. This is the one that is the more traditional project that spends the MPO funds. That's 80% local funds and 20% City of Kingsport, Pat Scholl's money. His front, his folding money up front. I don't know if Darryl helps him any or not, but anyway, that one's that way, and this is an example where it's not a state route, but we can use those federal gas tax dollars because it's what we call functionally classified, which is really just means it's a collector or above, based on the volume, based on the curb cuts, based on the land use planning and all that thing. We have an agreed set of roads that we can spend this money on. So that one's, we're nearing completion on the right of way, and should be able to start construction on that one this summer. So I'm not gonna go through all these. These are just some of the other projects we have going on. This list is almost the same probably as the last time I came here because projects move slow, but I've added 1 or 2 projects. I've taken off a couple projects. A normal TDOT project, I believe y'all are still using 12 years is a normal project development. Once you get to that, we're gonna do the project and it's funded for NEPA. That's just kind of a normal thing. Wanted to make sure y'all knew that long range plan Troy mentioned we are in the middle of doing. The website up there, Kingsport2045LRTP.com is where you can go, and this is kind of a little view of the virtual room that we've got set up where you can take our site survey over on the far right, and here's where you can email the project team our overall schedule, and you can sign up so that you get email updates when things go on. And then if you click on this table, it will take you to another link where you can go and say, right here on the map is a problem of, there's a capacity issue here, there's a safety issue at this road, and so we can gather all that input and include it in our long-range transportation plan. So you know, that process has TDOT and federal highway approval. And then, you know, a project that big, we'll hire a consultant to help us with, and we're in the middle of that process, now, so, I'll go there, and with that, I'll leave it for questions. We got about 15 to 1. And right here in the middle, yes, sir.
So what do you think the population change will be by 2045?
Well, we're in the middle of doing those. Honestly, sometimes we have a negative population growth if you're looking at, say, Sullivan County or others, but you know, we do population and employment growth considerations. We don't have those numbers developed for that right now, but I mean, you're talking single digits per year is typically what this region sees as far as growth